Racing is such a unique sport in that it challenges you in so many different ways. You're constantly uncomfortable, and as a driver, you have to learn how to adapt.
She's young, a go-getter with a passion to push herself and others, especially other women, to the limit.
I have a very strong belief that as humans, we're meant to be challenged, we're meant to grow, and I think why some people feel so anxious nowadays, unfulfilled, is we're not challenged as it's not, like survival mode as we used to be.
Meet professional race car driver Sabre Cook, blazing a trail as one of the few women in professional racing, the challenges of competing in a male-dominated sport, and her tie to the racing capital of the world. It's next on the Business and Beyond podcast, presented by PNC. Hello and welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. I'm Gary Dick. Preparation, teamwork, and family. Just a few important variables that have driven 30-year-old race car driver Sabre Cook into the forefront of the Porsche Carrera Cup North America Series. Sabre's love for racing started in Colorado, where her dad raced motorcycles professionally. She eventually decided she'd go the four-wheel route, starting at the age of 8 in go-karts and working her way up to one of racing's most competitive series. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure to be joined on the podcast this week by Sabre Cook. She is a professional race car driver and a mechanical engineer as well, based here in Indianapolis and really making some headlines in the racing circuit. And Sabre, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Now, you grew up in Colorado, but moved to Indianapolis, and you're here and really making headlines in the Porsche Carrera Cup Series. So talk about the series, what it's all about. Very competitive series, obviously. You drive for MDK Motorsports. What's the series all about?
So the Porsche Carrera Cup North America Series is a single make series, which means all of the cars are exactly the same. And we have a very limited setup window, so there isn't a ton of stuff that we can change on the cars. So comes down a lot to driver and preparation dependent. So the more prepared you are, the better you are executing the small things as a team, and then maximizing it as a driver, the more successful you will be. It is a global platform, so there's Carrera Cups all around the world. And Porsche does a really great job at creating this kind of motorsports ladder for young, aspiring, or even amateur drivers that are looking to get their feet wet. They have several levels. There'll be Sprint Challenge, which is below us, and then Carrera Cup is kind of the last leap from the Porsche ladder, where then the driver will go into, say, IMSA or WEC or something like that, something along those lines.
Talk about speeds. How fast the cars get going, because they really move, I know.
So it depends on what track we're racing on. We'll have different top speeds depending on the length of the straightaway and how fast we come out of the corner that goes on to the longest straightaway. I would say the top speed that we'll see overall, though, is probably 174 miles an hour. And I think we reached that at Miami because it has quite a long back straightaway.
Yeah, and you mentioned Miami, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You race, it's really some iconic venues.
Yes, we're very lucky. We have awesome race weekends that Porsche Motorsports has put together for us. We race mostly with IMSA, but we race 3 race weekends with Formula One. So at Miami, Montreal, and at COTA in Austin, Texas. So we get a mix of a lot of things, and it makes it really fun.
And you're really making some headlines because you're doing very well. Just recently here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, there was a races that weekend at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and you continued a string of top 10 finishes. Talk about that experience at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, A, from your performance and how you did, but B, just the experience of racing at IMS.
Well, racing at IMS is always special just because of the history behind it. And it makes it a challenging race because of the way that the surfaces of the track and our tires, managing them when they get hot. So sometimes it can be definitely tricky, but it was such a great experience being able to race there again this year. I think this is my maybe 4th time I've been able to race on that.
Yeah.
motorsports. So I really enjoy it, and it's always a great challenge when I come into a race weekend. We have an incredibly competitive field. We have ex IndyCar drivers, we have Super Cup drivers, we have factory drivers. So it's pretty incredible that I get to race in a field like this and just really challenge myself and look to grow each race weekend. And I have a great teammate who I can learn from. He used to race in Champ Car, so he has lots of ties to Indianapolis, and it's a really great place for me to be as a driver to develop and grow.
Yeah, what kind of support do you get here being in Indianapolis, the motorsports capital of the world? What's it like being here? Is that a benefit to you as a racer to be in Indianapolis?
I absolutely think it's a benefit to be based in Indianapolis. One, the cost of living is great.
Right.
And it's also a centralized location where I can get to a lot of tracks pretty quickly. And when I'm looking to buy a home, it's much more affordable here, which is why I'm also really lucky because one of my partners is PenFed Credit Union, and they obviously do home loans. So there's like so many ways that the racing has tied into every step in my life and is making it easier for me as a young person to get that home or learn how to build wealth and just really build a community here in Indianapolis.
You mentioned the cars are basically all alike. So that puts the onus on, the teams, teamwork, technical expertise. It's kind of right up your alley, right? Because not only are you a racer, you're a mechanical engineer. You got a degree in that field. How important is that technical knowledge to you, and how do you use it as you advance your career?
My experience as a mechanical engineer is definitely valuable at times. I think it helps me communicate well with my engineers, and it makes me understand their perspective when they're looking at things. But sometimes I definitely have to put that part of my personality in the way that I think aside on a race weekend or during a test, because at the end of the day, I have an engineer and that's their job, and I need to trust them and let them make the decisions, make the calls. And it is really important to have that trust with your engineer that you know that they are looking out for your best interests and that they're really switched on and want to win just as much as you
Right.
do. So
Is it tough to not to jump in sometimes on the technical side of things?
I think if you have a great engineer, then you don't need to. So
Yep.
it really does matter having such a great team around you. And now I'm running with Era Motorsports, and they are actually based here in Indianapolis. So it's been a fun part of the season where now I get to actually be part of a team that is where I am living for the first time.
Talk about the schedule, the grind, if you will, of the series. How many events do you have, and what is that like over the course of the year?
So we have 8 race events, but 16 races. So we have a 2-race format. We will start a race weekend with practice, and then we'll have qualifying, and then we'll have a race 1 and a race 2. In between all of those races throughout the year, most of my time is filled with training, sponsorship work, working with my partners, and just really making sure that I basically have everything I need to be able to compete on the racetrack. So it is pretty full-time like program. I would say we're very, very busy all the way from mid-February all the way to the end of October is kind of our concentrated part of the year.
You mentioned sponsorship. Certainly motorsports, unlike virtually any other professional sports, that's an important part of it. A lot of attention at the IndyCar, the F1, the highest levels of the sport. But certainly through all levels, sponsorship is important. How critical is it to your career, and how much pressure does it put on you to perform, but also to go out there and get those sponsors?
It is absolutely critical. Without my partners, especially like partners like Privé and PenFed Credit Union, they are my biggest partners right now. And without their support, I wouldn't be racing. It is unfortunately a very different structured sport in motorsports that you have to bring the funding and raise the funding just to be able to compete, let alone figure out a way to make a living. So without my partners, I really would not be able to live out my goals and my dreams. So I really appreciate it. And it is pressure, right? But pressure is also a privilege. And I just try to look at it as I am so grateful and I feel so valued that my partners see this value in me and see value in our partnership. And I take it as like, wow, it's so great to have these people behind me and supporting what we're trying to achieve. So I look at it as a positive way.
Talk about your dreams. They started, I think, at an early age, right? Your racing is really in your blood. Your dad raced motorcycles, right? Motocross, supercross, but your mom didn't want you racing motorcycles, right? Is that how you got into? I guess you got into karting to start out, like many do.
Yes, my dad, he definitely he used to race motocross and supercross professionally, and both him and my mom, not just my mom, didn't want me racing motorcycles, and I don't blame them. And I actually am very grateful now when I look at how broken up you get from riding a bike. There are obviously still risks with four wheels, but there it's less. So, yeah, it started karting when I was just before I was 8 years old, and just fell in love with it and started taking it really seriously when I was about 10, 11 years old. And it was a bug and it bit me, and I
Yeah.
didn't never give up since that moment and stuck with it. And eventually moved into cars in 2017 once I had a sponsor that was like, hey, I think you're pretty good, so let's put you in a car and see what happens. And now I'm really lucky to be here racing in the Porsche Carrera Cup.
We'll talk about that success you achieved early in the karting world. Talk about the championships you won and what got you to get to that next level.
So in karting, I won, I think it's a total of 14 championships. So it's three world championships, three national championships, and the rest were like state regional championships. And I had, honestly, karting will always kind of have my heart, I feel like, because that's what I just grew up doing. And it's such close racing. It's so fun. And you're just, there's not as much to worry and think about, I think, when you're in
Right.
karting. It's a little more pure, which is great. But I was eager to get into the car world, that's for sure. And it took the right time and the right sponsor to help me get there.
Yeah. As you think back, was there a point early on when you realized, kind of hit you that, hey, this is what I want to do? Was there a point, kind of an aha moment when you say, man, I'd love to do this for a career someday?
Absolutely. When I was 13 years old, I had raced in it was called the Tag World Championships. And we started off the weekend like struggling. We couldn't figure out what was wrong, like with the cart. I thought maybe it was me, maybe I was just, that far off. And then we realized there was a problem with the carburetor, and and it was cool because my dad was my mechanic. And so just being able to spend time with him, and we fought through this challenge together. And then we ended up sweeping the entire weekend. I think we qualified on pole, won all the heat races, and won the final by like 10 seconds. So it was like a dream sort of weekend. And I guess I just remember crossing that finish line and just being like, wow, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
it wasn't just the winning, right, that made it be like, well, winning is great.
Right.
But
Right.
I think because I got to go through a struggle and learn how to problem solve and be challenged and then come out on top, I think that's what made me feel like a whole complete human, is having all of those different elements to create something that I really love.
You talk about challenges, and you are a female in what continues to be a male-dominated sport. I'm sure it was an advantage to have a parent who was in motorsports to help guide you through. But talk about how you dealt with some of the challenges of being probably many times the only female at events. Are you the only, or are there two females now in the Porsche Cup series?
Yeah, I used to be the only one, but now there are two of us, so we've doubled. So
Making some progress. That's right. Well, what's it like in that role? Because you face the same challenges as the male drivers, certainly, but being a female, I'm sure there are others that kind of come to the fore.
Well, I wouldn't know any different, honestly, because I've grown up in it for so long, from such a young age. It's always been me finding my way in a world that is male dominated. But I think that the key things that have helped me be successful and to navigate spaces like motorsports and engineering that are male dominated is just not thinking that I have a disadvantage by my gender, and having a dad that believed in me and a mom that believed in me and didn't treat me any different because I was a girl, and never was like, oh, well, you can't do it because you're a girl. And having parents like that is such a valuable asset, as a young person. And I think not enough parents maybe realize the effect they can have on the way that their kids believe that they can problem solve and what they really can go after. And I think the other thing that helps me get through the male dominated space is just kind of realizing that you have to just focus on what you're doing and do your best, and the rest will kind of sort itself out. And don't really like think of it as a thing. You just, all you're there to do is like, man, woman, whatever, you're just there to learn, do your best, and do the
Yeah.
best you can with your team. So
Yeah. Well,
you
you
just
mentioned engineering, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So those are two fields. You're a racer, you're an engineer, two male-dominated fields. So that doesn't bother. It doesn't seem to bother you a bit.
I guess I'm just used to it at this point, and it's what I love to do. And I wasn't going to let the fact that I was either the only one or one of a few.
Right.
I wasn't going to let that stop me from being part of the industry.
Racing is a passion, obviously, but education is important to you as well. I mentioned you've got a degree in mechanical engineering from Colorado School of Mines. You like school, right? You like the education piece?
Yes, I actually really loved school from a young age. I really enjoyed math and science. And I remember like the day I learned long division in third grade. That's literally how big of a nerd I am. And so for me, it was easy because I liked school and I liked learning, and I actually miss it sometimes. So for me, it just made sense to go pursue an engineering degree. But on the racing side of things, I really enjoy being able to create and connect to new communities and educate them on the racing space so they can see how that they can join in and be a part of motorsports and be a part of the engineering side of motorsports. We just actually had a big fundraising dinner as part of the Shift Up Now Foundation on Friday night that was presented by PenFed Credit Union. And there, basically, the group focuses on supporting females in the space and encouraging more young women and educating them on how to be successful in the space. So I am very passionate about education in all areas.
Now, has anyone, you would be just a prototypical person to get engaged in some of these efforts around STEM in general, but also STEM, motorsports, diversifying the sports. Are you engaged in any of the initiatives that are out there trying to get more women, not just in motorsports, but around STEM? Because I would think you would be just an incredible example to a lot of people out there.
I am part of Women in Motorsports North America, Tech Force Foundation, Shift Up Now Foundation. And I was part of Women in Engineering in college, as well as Mechanical Engineers, the Society of Mechanical Engineers. So I would say I've more recently been geared toward the racing side of getting women into it, but I would definitely be open to partnering with more groups on getting more people involved in STEM. There is a really great program as well called Sim for STEM that I've had interactions with, and they bring simulators and like all these fun projects to high schools, and they show the girls how to basically all the stuff you learn in school, how it applies to racing. So there's are some very cool initiatives out there.
What do you think about the initiatives, the efforts that are out there to diversify motorsports, in particular, in this case, women, to get more women engaged in the sport? Are they working? Would you like to see other things employed to try to get more women in the sport?
I think they are working. We're seeing a growth more than we ever have, and the more than I've ever seen since I've been in the racing world. So I think it is gaining traction, and I think having great role models and other areas where you can see a woman in that role, so that way a young girl can be like, oh, I can do that, and they see it as a pathway through. But I think we just have to really encourage men, women, especially in like the big corporations, to continue to invest in women in STEM and women in sport, because there is such a big gap still, unfortunately, with how much that is invested in women in sport. And if you can't see her, you can't be her. So as much as we don't think that it matters, it really does. And there was a young woman that raced when I was younger, and I remember watching her and be like, oh, she's great. She's a badass. Like, I want to be like her. So it really does. It does make a difference. And it does start with investing financially into women in STEM and women in sport.
There's a lot of momentum and a lot of talk, in particular here in Indianapolis, but around the country, of the Caitlin Clark effect, in the WNBA and basketball. Does that focus, that publicity, that hype around that, does that spill over, do you think, in other sports when it comes to women?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's all connected. I think women in sport and women's sports are growing rapidly right now. It's like the next big thing. And it's so cool to see, like in motorsports, and especially like in IMSA, I think one out of every two new fans is a woman. So it's really, really growing right now. And definitely having role models like Caitlin Clark that's showing that, hey, women in sport are super entertaining and people want to watch it. So I think it's just a matter of time. We've just kind of got to keep building and the wave will keep coming, keep coming.
Much more ahead with Sabre Cook. She's a professional race car driver, mechanical engineer, Colorado native who now lives in Indianapolis. We'll talk about her path to Indy when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
At PNC Bank, we're committed to making a difference in the lives of our customers and communities by helping them move forward financially. As a Main Street bank, we try to do right by our customers with every encounter. Our local teams offer personalized financial advice to help guide you in making the best decision. We're proud to be part of your community. PNC Bank. See how we can make a difference for you at pnc.com. Copyright 2022, the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., all rights reserved.
And welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Sabre Cook. She's a professional race car driver, drives in the Porsche Carrera Cup Series, recently had a race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, also a mechanical engineer. And she's here in Indianapolis. And Sabre, I want to talk about your path to Indy. We talked about how you got engaged in motorsports in the at a very young age and it caught the bug. Got an education in Colorado. As you think about what that education, your accomplishments in the classroom, and of course on the track, that got you to Europe, right? And I think a job at the Nissan Technical Center, and ultimately got you to Formula One.
Yes, it did. It was an exciting experience. In the end of 2018, I won the Infinity Engineering Academy. And that secured me a position to first start working with Nissan and Infinity at their UK headquarters. And so I moved over the pond. And then after that, I went to Renault F1, which is now Alpine F1, and worked in suspension composite design and learned a lot there. But I realized I couldn't work full time in Formula One and still race. It was a bit of a stretched schedule, and I was fresh out of college too. So like I was used to dealing with a very stressful schedule, but I was like, yeah, maybe this isn't the best idea. So then I ended up moving back to the US and continued to race in W Series because I raced it in 2019 and then continued that. And after I came back and then in 2022, I kind of more started to transition into the sports car world and then full-time transition into sports cars at the beginning of 2023.
Yeah, you mentioned hectic schedule. That was just became too much after you got out of college. But while you were in college, you were racing and you were getting an education, right? So that had to have been a big challenge, probably tested your resolve to keep going at some points.
Oh, I feel like every day. Like, definitely it was maybe not the most ideal schedule, and I would have recommend maintaining it for long periods of time, but I was really lucky to have great people around me, professors, fellow students that helped me get through it when I wasn't there very much. And I was actually only still racing karting at the time when I was in college. So I wasn't racing cars yet just because I hadn't found the sponsorship and partnership to do so. So maybe that made it a little easier, but we were racing quite a lot and it definitely took some time management.
Yeah. You mentioned people who supported you at that point and throughout your career. How important have been or are mentors to you? How do you have mentors that you really lean on?
Yes, I have several mentors that I have had over the years, and I honestly wouldn't be the same person without them. I wouldn't know how to navigate stressful situations without them. And I've been really lucky to have a few amazing people that have just come through my life and taught me some great lessons. So it's I'm very thankful to all the mentors out there. And if you are a mentor, thank you. So us young people couldn't grow up and learn without you.
Well, and again, back to the whole aspect of being a woman in a male-dominated field. As you look in motorsports and racing and some of the challenges you face as a woman, does it feel sometimes that you're under a microscope because you're the only woman perhaps the only woman in the field, or one of very few? How do you deal with that? And then there's the whole aspect of, social media. Everybody's got a platform to say whatever. How do you deal with those kinds of things? It's tough enough to just the driving piece, the physical and mental aspect of that. But how do you deal with all the other stuff?
Well, you just kind of learn what works for yourself, but the media side of things and being kind of under a microscope is every race car driver has to deal with media, and it's part of what we have to do as being in the sport. So you just learn how to give good interviews, you learn how to manage difficult questions, and you try to look at it as kind of how we talked about earlier, where pressure is a privilege, is what Billie Jean King says. You look at it as, yes, sometimes it maybe not be the most fun thing that you want to do all the time, but without the media, without the support, and just realizing that it's so cool that people value and want to talk to you so much that they do want to do that media and they do want to talk to you. So you just look at it as a blessing rather than like, do this. Social media has been a challenge for me. I will be honest. I am an introvert naturally, and I don't love having to put myself out there on the internet. But it is important to building a brand and building an image and helping get more exposure for my partners. So I've learned a lot over the last few years, and just trying to always improve on ways that I do post on social media, and always just try to make it fun, make it educational, but most importantly, stay true to myself and who I am, and just be authentic.
The challenges for everyone in racing. It's a dangerous sport, obviously. And you had to come back from some pretty serious injuries, right? After a crash, I think it was in 2021 in Austria. Talk about that and that road back. How serious an incident was that?
So beginning of the W Series season, I first lap, first turn, first corner.
Oh, boy.
I got crashed into on the right side, and unfortunately, it tore up my hip a bit and herniated a disc in my back. And I stubbornly continued to race through the season, and I was in Europe at the time, so I didn't really have the doctor look at it. But then, like, during the summer break, I'd come back to the US, and they took a look, and they were like, so it was really unfortunate. I did the best I could to survive through the season. But it was honestly, it was one of the most incredibly challenging years I've ever had, mentally, physically, emotionally. Being in a lot of pain while driving is never fun, and it's never fun when you're an athlete that's hurt and you have to perform anyways. And it was I grew a lot throughout that year, and then I was really lucky because I moved to Indianapolis at the beginning of 2023, and you guys have some incredible medical power here. So I got my surgery done here at the beginning of 2023 and beginning of 2022, and then recovered and came back full time and completely healed up in 2023.
Okay, what is next? You have a lot going on, Sabre. What's next? What are your goals? I'm sure you've got them out there, or where you want to go, maybe short term and long term. What's the road ahead for you?
Well, in the very short term, the road ahead is next at Road Atlanta. Actually, we will be racing there in a couple weeks, and then at COTA, we have the last two race events of the Porsche Carrera Cup Series that are presented by PenFed Credit Union. So really excited to get in the last two races of the year, and then next year, I will hopefully be returning back into the Carrera Cup program and continuing my relationship with Porsche Motorsports. But the ultimate goal would be to race as a part of a factory program and a factory team inside of IMSA WeatherTech Series or WEC. So being part of that those driver lineups that you often see at like the 24 Hours of Daytona and Le Mans, that is the dream.
Wow. What's it going to take to get there? Obviously, you've got to have results, on the track, but there's some, we talk about sponsorship, all the different elements that have to come together. What's going to take in your mind to get there?
Obviously, hard work, putting in developing yourself in the right way, getting with the right teams. But ultimately, I know that I can be successful and get there. It's just, unfortunately, it's just sponsorship.
Right.
The more
Yeah.
sponsorship you have, the more you can drive, the better you can train, the better resources you have around you. So that is honestly the biggest barrier for myself and most other female drivers, is having the sponsorship to be able to have the resources to perform on an even playing field. That's really all it comes down to.
Sabre Cook, a driver in the Porsche Carrera Cup Series, also a mechanical engineer. She has lots of talents, and she's making lots of headlines as well. Sabre, it's really been a pleasure chatting with you. Wish you nothing but success. You are a role model for a lot of people, and I know you'll be making a difference not only on the track but off as well. So good luck to you.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. It's a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can catch all of our episodes, more than 200, and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.